Hey everybody, it's Michelle and this is Queer Hustle, where we showcase queer entrepreneurs so we can learn from them. And I am so excited. Today we have Dr. Cadyn Cathers, founder of Affirmative Couch. Cadyn, you want to introduce yourself to the crew?
I would love to. So my name is Cadyn Cathers. My pronouns are he, his, and him. I am the director of the Affirmative Couch, where we provide online continuing education for psychologists about working with LGBTQIA clients, about working with polyamory, and working about kink in an affirmative way.
Such cool work and so very important. Why don't you tell us what led you to start this business in the first place?
So I am a therapist myself. I'm a psychological assistant in private practice. I'm still under supervision. And I'm also faculty in a program where I teach master's level clinicians. And then one of the wonderful things about being faculty is I get to teach people at the beginning of their careers about what does it mean to be an affirmative therapist. But then they go, and we're one of the only programs that actually does that kind of work. But then they go out into the field and so many are like, oh, we have all this in-depth knowledge from our master's program. But then they go out and do continuing ed and they're like, oh my God, this is another training about pronouns. And I'm wanting so much more. Like I'm a trans person myself, been working with the community for about 10 years. So when I go to a training, I get super excited. I'm like, oh, there'll be something that maybe I'll learn. And then it's like, oh, let's talk about the difference between sex and gender. And I'm like, I got this. Like super important stuff. Therapists definitely need to know that, but there's so much work. So there was so much more to the work than just knowing that. That's the baseline. That's the foundation. You definitely need to know it, but let's move towards actually being able to help people with much more nuanced problems and really being able to train people to be excellent therapists. So that's part of the reason I started the couch.
Well, absolutely. And then so I'm going to annoy you by taking it back more simple now, which was exactly what you said, I don't like doing. But for those of us who are not in the therapy world, can you just talk to us a little bit about affirmative therapy and what that means to you?
Sure. So affirmative therapy is different than friendly therapy because I think, yes, most therapists definitely have an open mind. They're like, yes, I want to support my client wherever they are, but that isn't enough. I think to be a good therapist in working with diversity, you have to have training and you have to have consultation and you have to have experience. Just being open-minded, it's a great baseline, but it's not enough because even if you have an open-minded therapist and then they ask a question of, oh, what is genderqueer or what does that mean? Then the client then has to be put in the role of educating the therapist rather when they're paying them. And that's, in my mind, completely unethical. So it's on the therapist to go get that training. So in my mind, affirmative therapists have that training. They've also done the inner work. Because we do grow up in this world that has all this homophobia, all this biphobia, all this transphobia, all this racism, cissexism, endosexism, monosexism. There's so many isms and so many phobias that there's no way that we as therapists aren't going to have that. And so that has to be worked through in order for us to not collude or reenact our patients' own traumas. Because if they've got a lot of shame around, I'm not good enough because I'm queer, and if we have that belief too, we're not going to be able to catch it and we're not going to be able to challenge it.
Let's shift focus for a second to the business aspect of this. This is quite an ambitious business model. And when you and I first started talking, I thought, I love this guy because I love anybody with a big master plan and something that's going to take years to build, and not everybody wants to do that, right? A lot of people, when they want to go into business, it's just, I want to trade my services for dollars, and how can I do that efficiently? And then those are easy to stand up. I get excited as a business nerd when I talk to someone like you who wants to do something more complicated, more complex, but obviously that's its own psychological challenge. You've got a really ambitious business model. It's going to take a while to get really profitable, especially if you want to make this affordable and accessible to people. How do you keep going yourself psychologically, knowing that the prize is down the end of the road, down a little bit further?
I think that's with the small wins of noticing that the mailing list is growing, noticing that people are excited. We've run discussion groups, so people talking about it, seeing comments of like people referring to our trainings, seeing the feedback about the trainings. Those are all the little wins that help me keep going around seeing the big vision. I think another big part is I'm working, this isn't the only thing that I do. So I have other things that help sustain me financially, so that I don't have to be worried about, oh my God, is the business making money, so that I can really invest in building the foundation for the business, and still be okay personally.
Absolutely. So a lot of people that watch this and listen to this are people that are just starting out, or people that are, thinking about starting something, that haven't started something yet. Maybe they're afraid to, or they're kind of like on the fence on that decision. Obviously we're talking to queer entrepreneurs here. What advice do you have for people that are just at the beginning of their journey?
So I think that getting someone to talk to around kind of operations, talking about strategy, talking about those things is super important. And this is where my bias is going to come out as a psychotherapist. I think being in your own therapy can be hugely helpful, because if there are those internalized messages of not good enough, of shame, of not being able to ask for your worth, when sending a proposal or a quote to a client, those are things that can be worked through in therapy, because that's where we can build foundations and kind of fill in some of those cracks that came out from childhood, especially as queer and trans people, because we didn't get support systems in the same way growing up. And so those messages need to be worked through. And I think therapy is a great way to work through them, with an affirmative therapist, I should say, too.
Absolutely. Get yourself an affirmative therapist. I love that advice. Dr. Cadyn Cathers, founder of Affirmative Couch, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you, and everybody else, we'll talk to you next time. Bye.